Number 4 is shaky cam. A lot of us who are using the M50 are more on the amateur side of videographers. Most professionals are not getting a camera like this to shoot professional video. Now what I see a lot of people doing when they're using the M50, they just sort of stand there holding the camera in front of them, and as you see, it gives you a really shaky look to your footage. And what you can do to rectify this is not just stand there trying to hold your camera and then getting these little micro jitters in that don't look very good. Get a tripod and set the camera on a tripod. Most Hollywood films, until the invention of Steadicams, were shot with majority static images, and they looked very cinematic. You can get beautiful shots without having any movement, just using a basic tripod. And I would say having shaky footage is going to be a lot less cinematic and look a lot more amateurish. People who have been doing this a long time talk about adding movement in your shots, but having bad movement with a lot of jitters in it is worse than having static shots. And when you do static shots the majority of the time, then your movement shots mean more. Number 5 is ISO. This happens a lot. People set up like a little studio, kind of like I have right now. They're just using the house lights. Then, in order to get it bright enough, they raise their ISO. And the higher you raise ISO, the more noise you're going to have. ISOs 400 and below should have relatively no noise. But when you get up to 1600 or 3200, you're going to start having a lot of noise in your footage. And not just noise, but it's going to make your image look softer. The lower your ISO, the sharper your image is. If in order to get it bright enough you have to go above 1600, I wouldn't do that at all. You need to add more light. If you can add even a cheap light, what I'm using right now, I'm just using a cheap softbox with a cheap bulb on a cheap stand. This is giving me a high quality light and allowing me to get my ISO at 100, aperture f2, shutter speed 50th, and then I'm actually using 2 stops of ND in order to get my exposure down. Want to get a low noise image? You've got to add more light. And number 6 is don't color correct. Now, hear me out. I'm not saying that no one should ever color grade footage from the M50. What I am saying is if you're not a professional, do not color grade footage from the M50. You can accidentally put colors into weird places, and that is a dead giveaway that it is an amateur's film. Even if you do know how to color grade, you have to be super careful when using cameras like the M50. You have a low bit rate, it's only 8-bit color depth, it's only 420, and the more you push 8-bit footage, the softer it gets. So I would just avoid color grading, use the colors straight out of the camera because it does give good results. Now I've been thinking about working with a professional colorist to make LUTs for the M50. If you're interested in that, let me know down in the comment section. It is a bit hot in my new studio because I don't have any air conditioning. It's like 95 degrees outside. So if I'm sweating a little bit, just bear with me. Tip number 1, and this is the most important one out of all of the tips I'm sharing today, is change your picture style. This is the picture style straight out of the camera, the standard picture profile that you will have when you turn on the camera. I've actually shot for a long time with standard picture profiles, and then I learned how to achieve a flatter image that balances your highlights by using the neutral profile, but then going into the custom settings and changing my contrast to -4, my sharpness to +2, and moving my saturation to +1. And this tip is probably the most important. This is where I tell everyone. I've had this specific tip in so many videos. So many people tell me in their experience they hated the image that they were getting. They switched the picture style and they said it was like a new camera. Trust me, change your picture style from the standard to the modified neutral, you won't regret it. Number 2, and this kind of goes along with number 6, is use custom white balance. If you look at this shot with the automatic white balance, the colors just look off. It doesn't look very good. And now, yes, about 70% of the time, you will get good colors using the automatic mode on the M50, but that 30% of the time that you don't can really mess with your film. Whereas if you either set your Kelvin value manually, like I'm doing right now, or I will link to a video above where I show you how to do a precise custom white balance. Those are the ways I would suggest you setting your white balance. Number 3, and this mainly applies to like the vlogging scene, which a lot of people who have the M50 are actually vloggers. I mean, don't just hold the camera in front of you for your talking segments. Now, I know it's a temptation, especially if you're like walking around or something. You're just walking and you're like, oh, well, I'll just sit there talking to the camera. Or I'll notice a lot of people, they'll maybe walk around their backyard or walk around their living room or something. It is a much better idea to set your camera down and walk around at different angles, keeping your framing in mind, because one thing, when you're hand holding it, you're not thinking about your framing that much. When you set your camera down, looking at it, then you're thinking about your framing. That is going to make your footage look a lot more dynamic, a lot more interesting, and a lot more professional, like tip number 4 talks about. It looks a lot more professional than just holding a shaky camera in front of you. There's a lot of people who, when I was first making videos on the M50, a lot of people were like, why would you ever get this camera? Because it doesn't have IBIS, and you had to have IBIS for walking around vlogging. And yet I never had a problem with it, because I usually, when I'm vlogging, I set my camera down. Now, when you do that, then your handheld shots where you're moving around actually can have a lot more meaning. Say you're sitting down somewhere talking to your audience, and then you move over, doing a talking segment, walking, and you move to the next location, and it looks like you're progressing through your day, like you're progressing through your story. And that, in my opinion, is a lot better than just hand-holding your camera in front of you on a GorillaPod. Now, I did have a 7th, 8th, and 9th tip mistake that people usually make, but we don't really talk about those. 7, 8, and 9. Just, no. That's an inside joke. Some of you will get that. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it helpful. That's one thing that I want to do with the videos I'm making, is be helpful to you. Help you guys get better, more cinematic, higher quality footage. And if this video helped you do that, why don't you give it a like? Please subscribe to my channel for more content like this. And if you would like to support this channel and get me back making more content, why don't you go over and check out my Patreon. Now, right now, I have not been able to do anything for the patrons. It is literally just to support me. I probably will not be doing much on ads when it comes to YouTube's in the future, just because the ad policies is getting super funky. So if you want to support me more than watching ads, I would love for you to go over, check out my Patreon. I have a $1 tier and a $10 tier, and I thank you for all of your support, and I'll see you in the next video, whenever that is, and whatever that is, because I'm going to do more than just camera tutorials in the future. And I'm excited for it. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be, but I'm excited for it.